Test 1 2. Hey, real quick, this summer of harvest. Good afternoon, fellow patriots. This is Matt Shea, and welcome to Patriot Radio, broadcasting live from deep inside the heart of the future Liberty State. Brought to you once again by On Fire Ministries, in the legacy of Dr. Stan Monteith, bringing you the story behind the story and the news behind the news, where it's not about right or left, it's about right and wrong. It's about our hope not being in man, but in Jesus Christ. About not ending in prayer, but moving to action. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Father, deliver us from the evil one.
Welcome to Patriot Radio.
This is Matt Shea, and today on Patriot Radio, the failed coup in Bolivia, the Pope exposed by another Catholic leader, Israel prepares for war with Hezbollah, and Bill Jasper with us to discuss the Pope and the border crisis and more. Our goal here at Patriot Radio is to bring you more accurate information than the legacy media so that you and your family can be prepared for the times ahead. In fact, the times that are already upon us. No fear. We were made for this. And we've been talking for quite some time about the summer of harvest. Follow us on Telegram. Subscribe to us on Patriot Radio US at Rumble. Make sure also that you are following what we're doing with the Summer of Harvest, because tomorrow we are going to be in Deer Park. We're going to also be on Saturday in Coeur d'Alene, right near the Cracker Barrel restaurant. And then Saturday night right here at On Fire Ministries in downtown Spokane with Chris Overstreet at 5 p.m. We're going to be doing the final Summer of Harvest outreach event, and it's been amazing. We've been up in Colville, been to Newport and Northport, Washington. It's really been amazing to see the response. Today, Ephrata and Moses Lake. So, if one of those cities was you and you didn't know about it, I want you to go ahead and message us, because we're coming back and we're going to be spending entire days in these cities evangelizing and worshiping and expanding the kingdom of Jesus Christ. And that brings us to a few of the great testimonies from this summer of harvest. If we have a couple of these pictures we could put up here. Amazing altar call up in Colville, Washington. But also, if we could put up the picture of the white SUV. This SUV was on the side of the road. Every single one of them gave their lives to Jesus Christ. It started when God told one of the Christians there to donate to the kids' lemonade stand. And one of the girls felt God's presence and started crying. Then her friends came to the gospel truck and they all got saved. Also, we had one random street person testified to having her knee healed. One young lady said that God took away her depression and anxiety when they prayed for her. And multiple churches gathered together in Colville and received fire for preaching the gospel and bringing Jesus's love over the land. There's that white SUV I was just talking about. Now, it's very interesting. This is bringing churches together right now. We need to be united And you'll see the gospel truck right there. We would need to be united. As we come into a community, it is not about On Fire Ministries. It is about the kingdom of God. And we like to connect people to their local churches. And with this, there is one last piece. One volunteer saw a vision of Jesus in the gospel truck who pointed out a boy in Ione, Washington. And he had a blue hat who rode his bike to the gospel truck in the parking lot. And in the vision, Jesus was crying out with compassion and understanding. And he pointed to the boy and said, "That one, that's who it is." Well, that boy in a blue hat rode his bike to the parking lot and stayed at the gospel truck and listened to the gospel of Jesus for hours. And he was the exact boy in that vision. He was the only one there for a while, but Jesus had an appointment just for him. And Jesus has an appointment just for you as well. Now, as we go into this weekend, there's going to be even more testimonies. Last year when Chris Overstreet was here, we had just dozens of people saved and baptized. Absolutely incredible. So come out and join us for the Summer of Harvest here this Saturday night, right at On Fire Ministries at 5 o'clock, right here in the parking lot. At 12 o'clock, if you're over in Coeur d'Alene, join us at the Cracker Barrel Restaurant. I look forward to seeing you all there. Now, tonight, something might be happening. And we have a good versus evil segment here that is the inside scoop on Joe Biden's debate preparation.
You got this, all right? Number one, the dude's convicted felon. Say Trump's a convicted felon over
every answer. All of them.
Felon, all right? Russia, bad. Russia's real bad.
Real bad.
Who win?
Don't like them.
Ukraine, good. Zelensky, more money. Billions to Ukraine.
More money.
All right, our border is secure. What is he talking about? Wide open border. What are you, nuts? Aliens are cool. LGBTQAI+. We love the gays.
Can't
Joseph.
get enough
We
of
love
them.
the gays.
You're gay. I'm gay.
You're gay.
We're all
Okay,
gay.
all right. The economy. Hey, Joe, focus.
Hey,
all right? Shiny thing.
Remember the plus.
Girl. Yeah, Roe v. Wade, abortions, have them. Everybody have them. Wait, Joe, wake up. Hey, wake up. Joseph, don't fall asleep.
It's
That's
number one on the list.
Give me the adrenaline.
More?
Yes, we need more. This guy's a freaking passing out old.
All right, Joe, wake up.
Adrenaline shot is ready, and boom. There we go. Daddy likey, huh? Daddy likey, huh? All right, Joe, focus. Continue.
Now,
all right, don't talk incest. You didn't show.
The fact is, this is so sad, but so very true. And go ahead and continue the clip.
Your daughter at an inappropriate age.
You were conserving water.
Yeah,
from the
you're going
environment.
green, okay? Don't slip and fall. Do not slow your words. And listen, if Hunter comes up, he's amazing, all right?
The smartest man
you know. And do not say the N-word, Joseph.
We're live. We can't call it
I know
this
you
time.
love it. And guess what? If you don't say the N-word, you get a little treat.
Double stuff
Oreo cookie. Last but not least, do not insult Israel. Don't you dare.
You love the Jews. You
love
can't get
the
enough.
Jews. So I think we're good.
You know, and what I really enjoyed about this clip is it used humor to tackle some very, very serious issues. You know, as you heard that literally are the talking points of those under the influence of evil. Literally. So it'll be interesting to see what happens at the debate. And that brings us now to your daily intelligence briefing. Coming to us from, and actually, before I get to that, I almost missed our Bible study today. Matthew 22, verse 32. I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but the God of the living. When the crowds heard this, they were astonished at his teaching. I think we need that refresher today that God is the God of the living, and everything that he touches, he redeems and brings back to life. That is why he wants to redeem the entire earth. He wants to bring it back to life. It's his Edenic vision. It needs to be restored. And so in your life right now, is there something that Jesus needs to touch and bring alive in your life? Or maybe your family? If there is, bring it up in prayer tonight and let Jesus manifest his presence in the middle of whatever you're facing today. And we also pray in agreement right now that he manifests his presence in the middle of this crisis in our nation. And that brings us now to your daily intelligence briefing. Coming to us from the globalist front, climate change is a $100 trillion wealth transfer from the poor to the rich. And the Trilateral Commission's chief objective is to fleece the world by stealing all the resources, or at least controlling all of them anyway. This series explains the current unstable financial environment caused by climate change. Well, that's exactly what it is. Green on the outside, red on the inside. And that book, Watermelons, written years ago, is exactly correct. And that brings us now to the China front. Chinese and Taiwanese coast guards in a tense standoff near Kinmen Island. 4 vessels entered restricted waters on Tuesday, remaining there for 2 hours. Taiwan's Coast Guard says the mainland Chinese and Taiwanese Coast Guards have been involved in a tense standoff near another island in the latest flare-up. And the incident came after 4 Coast Guard ships from mainland China were patrolling in the waters just 5 nautical miles away from this recent incident. And again, the Philippines have said we are not invoking the Mutual Defense Treaty, even though there was physical contact made by Chinese ships with the Philippines. So, a flashpoint there indeed. But really what the question is the United States going to step in for its allies? Taiwan warns its citizens to avoid travel to China. Thursday, Taiwan's government raised its travel warning for China, saying that citizens should not travel to the country unless absolutely necessary, and the warnings also extend to Hong Kong and Macau. If it is not necessary to go, then don't, said the spokesman for the Mainland Affairs Council. The warning comes after China announced new legal guidelines that threaten to execute Taiwanese separatists in some cases. They're just, again, ratcheting up the level there and headed toward war. Also, South Korea's Marine Corps has resumed full-scale live fire exercises on islands near the inter-Korean maritime border for the first time in 7 years. And this comes on the heels of several border incursions by the North Koreans and also some intense rhetoric coming out of North Korea. And not just about South Korea, but also that they would be sending advisors to Ukraine. Lastly, on the China front, former Chinese defense minister was expelled from the Communist Party. We talked about this on Patriot Radio. There were 2 separate officials arrested. Now this guy has been expelled from the Communist Party and prosecuted allegedly for corruption. So something was stirring there in China, and they're trying to maintain control, which means the Xi is facing internal forces. Now, the history of China has been instability internal to its own borders. They've never been able to last as an empire for very long because of that instability. In fact, the Communist Party, going the longest in modern times anyway, to try to maintain stability in China by killing millions, actually tens of millions of people. So the more that Christianity grows in China, the more there's going to be instability there. And I think the Chinese are facing a decision. They have a demographic crisis they are facing. They have an internal crisis they are facing. And they also have a crisis financially. All of those things pointing toward war. That brings us to the Middle East front. The U.S. Department of State has now released an updated security alert for Lebanon, stating that American citizens should strongly reconsider any travel to the country while avoiding any and all travel to southern Lebanon, the Syrian-Lebanese border, and refugee settlements. It looks like the Israelis are, in fact, poised in the next couple of weeks to attack Hezbollah in Lebanon. What does this mean? Well, this means 80% likelihood or higher of a regional war. And that brings us to another interesting thing. There's been a lot of anti-Israel rhetoric out there. And by the way, if you guys have the chance to join us, anybody listening in Patriot Radio Land, July 13th, down at the City Council, we're going to have a united march for Israel. Several churches in the community are coming together to do this. There is a lot of disinformation coming out of that conflict. But this is probably one of the bigger ones. Now, the fact that journalists were working with Hamas, now you have a Doctors Without Borders person. Well, he was killed by the Israelis because he was a jihadi. Doctors Without Borders denied that, and the IDF released photographs of him in his Islamic Jihad uniform. And that brings us now to the Russia front. The Biden administration is reportedly moving towards lifting a ban on American military contractors from serving in Ukraine, allowing both companies as well as independent contractors to maintain and operate U.S.-provided weapon systems utilized by the Ukrainian armed forces. In other words, taking the veil off because contractors have been there. So has special forces and clandestine entities. Now they're lifting the veil, and contractors are going to be serving in Ukraine. Again, this war is being kept going. Russia's not allowed to win. Ukraine is not allowed to really win. It's kept going because it is all part of the design for World War III. And I want to explain something to everybody and just take this few minutes to explain this. Has anybody ever really asked the question, why did they pick Russia for Russia collusion in 2016 when Trump won? Could it be that they have been planning World War III for a long time so that they can usher in, just like they tried after World War I and just like they tried after World War II, a one world government, one world religion, and one world economy? And to do so, they would need to take out a broad swath of Christian patriot leaders in America. And to do that, they know that the war is going to be against Russia. So they paint Trump as colluding with Russia and all of his MAGA supporters as colluding with Russia, so that when World War III breaks out, they will try to use war powers and a narrative to say that those Christian patriot leaders in America are subversives and therefore should be rounded up. Could that be the reason? So people have to be smarter than just parroting things and understand the bigger thing that is happening here, and that is World War III. And why, we could go on for a couple hours, but why also would they weaken the United States of America so much right now, right before a potential world war? Also, as many of you already know, Julian Assange has been released from prison. It struck a deal. But there was some tweets that came out that, quote, Assange has agreed to destroy all information, not just classified documents or classified information. This request and agreement would include political emails, text messages, recordings, audio, video, statements, affidavits, everything. All information, i.e. the entire WikiLeaks library, has not been published, and any information held to confirm, verify, or corroborate. And that tweet is false. So it's gonna come out here next week. What really is happening with this? Be careful who is trying to steer narratives right now, because they probably are not on our side. Also, Ireland's lower house narrowly votes for national suicide. J. Michael Waller, the politicians just passed an EU immigration pact that will see even more untold numbers of migrants to cram onto Ireland. Now, the Irish spent 800 years kicking the English and their proxies out of Southern Ireland because they had been invaded. I don't think that the Irish people are going to take this lying down. Also coming to us from South America, the failed coup in Bolivia. Now, here's a couple of things that are kind of key context here. So lithium is a big commodity in Bolivia, and China is the big consumer and has contracts for that lithium in Bolivia. So this is an interesting little tale of unrest, but the bottom line is this coup failed because the general, Juan Jose Zuniga, was arrested by his own troops. In other words, he wasn't really prepared for a coup. That brings us now to the national front. Christians Against Trumpism co-founder arrested for soliciting sex from a 15-year-old boy. Not much else I really want to say about that one, but it's very interesting that Trump is a big discernment point right now for who is on the side of good and who is on the side of evil. Coming to us from Gateway Pundit, White House press corps is going to be forced to watch the feed of the CNN debate from a building across the street, quote, because they believe there may be a medical emergency involving one of the candidates requiring on-scene coverage, end quote. According to Real Clear Investigations reporter Paul Sperry, the White House press corps is being forced to do this because of this preparation for a medical emergency. White House press corps has petitioned CNN to open up the debate studio to reporters who for now have to watch the feed from the building across the street because there, quote, may be a medical emergency. So very interesting what's going to happen. Also, in a 6-3 vote, the justices of the United States Supreme Court upheld the decision by a deeply conservative federal appeals court that ruled in favor of plaintiff George Jarkissi, the founder of an investment fund who had been fined $300,000 for security fraud in order to repay $685,000 in illicit gains. Curbing the, and this is a big win, by the way, curbing the enforcement powers of federal agencies, the court ruled that forcing the defendants to go through the SEC's in-house tribunals, those are called administrative law judges, rather than a federal court, violated the constitutional right to a jury trial. This is going to reverberate through the executive branch, and it's about time. These administrative law judges have been long criticized as just being a rubber stamp for the agency. Also, from the Epoch Times, with global coffee production under threat, farmers seek new solutions. Coffee plantations face threats from bugs, plagues, and genetic fragility, putting America's annual consumption of 1.6 billion pounds of coffee at risk. Say it ain't so. Maybe some of those wineries being plowed under in Washington could become coffee plantations. Just a thought. Also, from the New American, Mayorkas spews outright lies about possible migrant terror attacks as Congress must fix the border. Well, more than 300 terror suspects caught at the border this fiscal year. And we now know that Unit 910, the Jungle Tigers, the special forces from China, Unit 910, the special forces from Iran, have come across the border and have been infiltrating. We know that's been going on. And so we just see this continued to be covered up by the Biden administration. Now, why would they allow, right before the election, this to happen? And then welfare offices in 49 states, according to J. Michael Waller, are handing out voter registration applications to illegal aliens and no proof of citizenship required. And in Washington state, lifting the 30-day period between the election and registration so that people can be registered and vote at the same time. That's just a recipe for fraud. And unfortunately, Republicans aren't doing very much to stop it. Now, in other parts of the country, absolutely. And we need to do more here. I understand we're in a minority here. But this needs to be a vocal issue on both sides of the state. And we need to be asking our county auditors, what are their processes for ensuring every vote is counted and those who are not citizens aren't allowed to vote? Because otherwise, foreign influence would just run rampant in here. We wouldn't want that, would we? Or maybe that's been the plan all the way along. And that's why our guest today is going to be so important. We're going to talk about these issues here in a few minutes. But I want to go back to one other thing here from Insider Paper, and I want to make sure that we are understanding the full import of what's happening in the Supreme Court this week and tomorrow, particularly shaping up to be a huge day. Major decisions about ready to come down. But this SEC enforcement power, I just want to give everybody an understanding legally of what this means. The constitutionality of hundreds of statutes may now be in peril, and dozens of agencies may be stripped of their power to enforce laws. Yes! Praise the Lord. Finally, the bureaucrats are stripped of some power. This is a gigantic win. And if it holds true at the national level, then the right to trial by jury, which is enshrined in every single state constitution, now the cases are going to come at the state level, and they are going to strip. They have to, because the United States Supreme Court has ruled on this, right? They're going to have to strip the bureaucrats of power at the state level, too. This is gigantic. And particularly regarding climate change, this is going to, and these cases where people's property has been seized effectively because their property has been rendered useless. This, in addition to several other cases that have been decided recently, sending shockwaves through the government. And this is a gigantic thing for this reason. Many people have said to me that they believe in term limits for politicians. I actually don't. This might shock you a little bit. And here's why. Because it's not the politicians that are necessarily the issue, because they come up for a vote all the time. It's the bureaucrats. If you want term limits, there should be bureaucrat term limits. Severe curbs on bureaucrats and bureaucrat power. Now, this is a biblical thing too. And the founding fathers actually put this as one of the reasons for the revolution in the Declaration of Independence, that King George III would send forth hither swarms of officers to eat out our substance. Those were bureaucrats from the king that would come out and just arbitrarily take things. They were never really held accountable for anything. They had a huge attitude everywhere they went. And this has been the experience for a lot of people, especially in the Western United States, regarding property rights. So these cases are huge. We're going to keep following this, and I hope that you share that too with your friends and your family. Now, Trump just arrived. This is 12 minutes ago. Just arrived in Atlanta, Georgia for the upcoming presidential debate with Joe Biden. Also, I find this fascinating too. As Trump walked in, he was walking extremely confidently, and it looks like Joe Biden is just kind of remaining hidden. It makes you wonder if something weird is going to happen at the debate tonight. And remember, we're saying this before the debate actually is taking place. This is a live broadcast. So it makes you kind of wonder if something was about to happen. All right. That is the briefing. Remember, the antidote to dependency and socialism is to be a God-fearing, self-reliant, freedom-loving American. Thank you to everybody praying for us. And again, follow us on Telegram for real-time intelligence updates. Also, we have all of our events online on the calendar, and we post regularly on the On Fire Telegram channel. So we have the Patriot Radio channel. We have the On Fire Telegram channel. We post regularly about the upcoming events. So again, this Saturday night here at On Fire Ministries, 5 o'clock, Saturday the 29th, Summer of Harvest, right here in the parking lot. Passion to Action and Chris Overstreet is going to be here. Look forward to seeing you all then. Also coming up July 13th at 3 o'clock is the United for Israel March, starting at the City Hall downtown. United for Israel March. And I look forward to seeing everybody there. And, you know, some people are going to be really upset about this. Go read Romans 11. It's crystal clear in the scripture. God's promises are true. And the Jewish people will be redeemed as well, because Jesus Christ said that he came so that all might be saved, but they have to choose him. And that is the key. All right. Our guest today is Bill Jasper, the senior editor of the New American Magazine, an expert on the sordid history of the American border. In fact, he's been covering it for over 40 years. Bill, it is great to have you back on Patriot Radio. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing well. Pleasure being back with you, Matt.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the debate tonight really quick. I would like to get your take on it. I mean, it seems like they've been really pushing the medications on Joe Biden to try to get him functional for the debate tonight. Obviously, debates don't really matter a whole lot, but I think this is just a picture of the two candidates for the American people.
Well, I will be amazed, actually, if the debate really comes off and if Biden lasts through the debate. And in fact, I have speculated, just speculation, that this could be actually the planned time for his exit, that he will so clearly show that he is mentally unfit and may even have a collapse or something, and that would then allow them to bring in their optional plan, which is to replace him temporarily with Kamala, and she would be told, okay, this is temporary. We're going to move you out as soon as we have Joe's replacement in there, and you'll be given a cushy sinecure at a major university, chancellorship, or on board of directors of corporations and foundations, etc. And then the delegates for Joe obviously would be released, and in August, if not before, we would see the crowning of whomever will be the chosen, whether it be Hillary or Michelle or Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan or Gavin Newsom, or, I mean, those in my mind are the leading ones. But I don't see, I could be wrong, but I don't see Joe really coming out of this debate in any way positively.
Right. I mean, there's time between the debate now and the Democrat convention where they could have a new nominee based on exigent circumstances. We actually have talked about this for a while, and it does seem they're setting it up for the old switcheroo at the last minute. I mean, is Michelle Obama a potential?
Well, in fact, for months, if not the past year, I believed that she was going to be the one that was going to be chosen. And I think that she is the leading contender. And if you look at the way she has been promoted, and particularly the way in which both she and her handlers and promoters have been claiming that she hates politics and she would never consider going into politics. This is one of those Brer Rabbit things where please don't throw me into the bunch, because she and Barack have been very much involved for the last 7 years since leaving the White House in building an election apparatus and promoting themselves. And of course, they benefited very handsomely financially. They have been given all kinds of great contracts with Netflix and other movie producers, book deals. They become instant millionaires. And despite the claims that they want to save the planet from our carbon footprints, they have, of course, established a couple of new mansions, and like the rest of the green hypocrites, have been living very high on the hog.
Well, let's talk a little bit about kind of the next phase of what happens. So there is a dramatic transition in the Democrat Party, and there is a new candidate, very likely Michelle Obama. Obviously, they're going to be pressing their agenda for total control. Looks like we're going to just barrel headlong into World War III if there isn't a change in leadership in the White House. And, you know, I mean, I think this underscores why we all should be getting involved at the local level right now, why we should all be getting involved across the country in unity right now. What is your take on this election coming up? What's your take on the direction that we're headed?
Well, you and I and all of your listeners and audience, we've been living in very perilous times, the most perilous really in our nation's existence. I think more dangerous than during World War I or World War II. Of course, we we were separated from all of the real war and fighting during those big epic wars. This time we won't be, and I don't believe it will be because of nuclear war through exchange of missiles and bombs. If we have nuclear war here, I believe it's more likely that the nuclear devices have already been planted here, because our adversaries do not want to completely obliterate this country. They want to take it over as.
Looks like the internet connection froze up. But I could not agree more about the fact that there are pre-positioned nuclear weapons inside the United States of America. We have talked about this on the show. Stanislav Lunev, who was a defector from the Soviet GRU to the United States back in 1993, testified before Congress in 2000 about the fact that there were 48 potential nuclear weapons here unaccounted for on U.S. soil, suitcase nukes. And that is what it means, like literally a nuclear device the size of a suitcase. Now, they went to some of the locations that Stanislav Lunev talked about, but they were gone. Well, obviously, they probably got moved. But what's more interesting is that General Lebed corroborated Stanislav Lunev's story. And General Lebed, after he did that, was put to a far-flung outpost as a governor in Russia and then died mysteriously in a helicopter crash. So these are the kind of things that you look for to validate that type of information, and particularly regarding the evil that we're facing. Don't put it past them to try to detonate a nuclear weapon inside the United States of America, just like Jack Decker talked about back in 2020 here on Patriot Radio, and then use that as the cause for World War III, and, of course, blame the Russians because these were Russian suitcase nukes inside the United States. And then, of course, China, taking advantage of the fact that the United States is now at war, would try to invade Taiwan, and then you have South Korea in the mix as well, and then it just spirals from there. Don't put it past these people to do something like that. One or two nuclear weapons inside the United States, and then the powers that be in this country trying to roll up the Christian patriot leaders here in the United States would have every reason to suddenly allow a blackout to happen for a few days, then do that. And of course, not focused on maybe some of the top, more visible leaders, but on the second and third tier influencers in America that really make the country, as far as patriotism is concerned and Christianity is concerned, go round. Let's continue to watch for this. Now, have we got Bill Jasper back? Now, it looks like we're still trying to get him back on. So, the debate tonight could shape up to be the turning marker where they replace Joe Biden finally. And then again, right before, of course, the Democrat convention, the Republican convention, that something like this would happen. Also, we're going to talk about the southern border here in just a minute when we get Bill back on. And we're going to talk about the Pope, and I want to give a little bit of background about what the Pope just did and why this is important and how this is bringing politics back into the Catholic Church at the highest level. Now, I find some of this a little bit interesting. Archbishop Vigiano says he faces schism charges from Vatican's doctrinal office. Now, an Italian Catholic priest has been excommunicated for having publicly committed an act of schismatic nature while celebrating Mass at his parish near Livorno. Now, this was a priest, Raymond Guidetti, who dedicated his homily to marking the anniversary of the death of Pope Benedict and called him the true Pope who never fled. Mark of Peter. Now, what I find fascinating about this is that this was kind of the precursor to what happened to Vigano. Now, he was charged with schism, calls Vatican II and Pope Francis a, quote, cancer. The outspoken former Vatican diplomat published Thursday morning images of the citation in an extrajudicial process authorized by the Catholic Church. And according to the citation dated June 11th, the DDF's senior membership voted to proceed with his prosecution via an abbreviated extrajudicial process as opposed to a full canonical trial, and have ordered the former Vatican ambassador to appeal at the dicastery in Rome to answer for the charges on June 20th. So that brings us really to last week. And we have Bill back up finally. Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and then move to the next thing right now, and we'll come back to the Pope, and that is the southern border. And if you missed this clip with J.R. Nyquist, I'm going to go ahead and play this clip right now so everybody can listen to it again, because this should be national news. This is a bombshell here in the U.S. Okay, Bill is back with us. Are you back on, Bill?
I am here. I hear you.
All right, fantastic.
Those nasty CIA guys or KGB guys knocked us out, apparently.
Yeah. As soon as we start talking about nuclear weapons on U.S. soil, all of a sudden, So let's talk quickly. Before we get to that, because I want to get to that, Stanislav Lunev and his testimony before Congress in 2000, backed up by General Lebed. But before we get to that, I really want to talk briefly about the Pope. There has been a lot of controversy right now because of the Pope politicizing the Vatican against some of his critics. If you could kind of catch everybody up, I kind of did a little bit of context, brought everybody up to speed to last week about Archbishop Vigano. So if we can go from there.
Yeah, so I have a story at the New American in which it includes an embedded video of Archbishop Vigano. As your listeners may know, last week he was summoned to come to Rome to stand trial for schism, and he was likely going to be excommunicated. And supposedly it was for creating disunion with the Pope. We've done a number of stories on Archbishop Vigano. He's very controversial in Catholic circles. I'm Catholic. He, even among many people who are traditionalists and conservatives, they are not on board with everything that he says. However, he has a very impressive resume. His background at the highest levels of the Vatican gave him a lot of inside information. For many years, he was the third highest person in the church. He was the Secretary General of the Vatican State, and then he was appointed as Papal Nuncio to the United States, meaning the ambassador. But before that, he was actually looking into the sex abuse cases, and not just the cases themselves, but the cover-ups and the networks of homosexuals within the clergy and the hierarchy of the church. And this has been growing, as he points out, since Vatican II, when the infiltration of the Catholic Church really went into high gear. It had already been brewing for, as Dr. Taylor Marshall in his book Infiltration points out. He's a Catholic podcaster, theologian, philosopher, historian. And he pointed out in his book, Infiltration, that this has been ongoing for over 100 years. And he particularly focuses on as other Catholic authors have. Back after the French Revolution, when the Illuminati-based revolutionists from that period went to Italy and formed the Alta Vendita. And so it was their purpose to infiltrate the bishops and the clergy and the seminaries, and eventually have a pope according to their own heart, one who would be anti-Christian rather than Christian. And so many people believe, and I am one of them, that they have achieved this now in placing Jorge Bergoglio as Pope Francis on the chair of Peter in Rome. And so it's primarily because of his exposure of these things that Archbishop Vigano was summoned to Rome. He did not go on the 20th as he was requested to do, and he was told that he had until the 28th, that would be tomorrow, to present a written defense to perhaps avoid being excommunicated. But he has said that he is not going to. I give a link in there to his statement on why he is not going to go, and he gives a very brief 1,100-word statement about all the offenses, heretical and criminal offenses that he lays at the feet of Pope Francis. And then I give links to a couple of other organizations as well, or rather groups. A group of 17 prominent Catholic scholars, theologians, etc., this past May, just a couple of months ago, last month, issued a statement calling upon Pope Francis to resign. And in that statement, it's quite lengthy. They go through 7 heretical areas of heresy, which they say disqualifies him as Pope, as well as dozens of sexual abuse cases, which they point out in secular courts as well as in the canonical church courts, as well as in natural law and divine law, are considered crimes. So it's not just, that is, crimes particularly of covering up sexual abuse. And in many of these cases, sex abuse with minors, and in most of the cases, 80% of the cases, it's homosexual in nature. Yeah. So these are some of the things that are very big that are happening, whether one is Catholic or not Catholic, or even anti-Catholic. The Catholic Church is the largest Christian denomination in the world, and the Pope carries a big moral footprint in the world. And unfortunately, he has been using his powers for the wrong.
Yeah, I think that's why this is why it is such a big issue, is because he does have a moral place. He has a place of moral influence that is large. And I want to ask just a quick question before we shift gears, because I don't want to run out of time. I want to talk about the border. But if someone is excommunicated from the Catholic Church, are they considered to have lost their salvation? And then in this case, if the Pope is not being recognized as having proper authority because he's in heresy, then that excommunication would not be an effective excommunication. If you could kind of walk through that very quickly.
Yeah, so excommunication removes a person from the church community. And yes, it does jeopardize their salvation unless they are restored to unity before they die. So, however, there have been people excommunicated in the past who then later, for instance, Archbishop Vigano says, he refers to the late Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, who is a traditionalist Latin Mass Catholic archbishop, was very famous for his missionary work throughout Africa, founder of the Society of St. Pius X. So Archbishop Lefebvre was excommunicated, but later on, and others, the other bishops with him were excommunicated. And that was then later removed by a future pope. And so Archbishop Vigano said, well, my words are Archbishop Lefebvre's words, and my position is his position. And so he is saying that the Pope, and he has it gets rather complex. He says that the Pope, that Jorge Bergoglio was never legitimately the Pope. And he says that's because of a defect of consent. That is, he is saying that at the time when he consented to become Pope, and I happened to have been in Rome at the time, right there at St. Peter's, I was in the front row there below the dais, below the balcony when he came out of the conclave. But he says that from the very start that Bergoglio did not intend to carry out his duties of protecting and defending the faith. And of course, that's something that would have to be proven in a court by the College of Cardinals.
I mean, that is a big accusation.
Sure. I mean, that is, others have claimed that, have used a different avenue, have said that he has lost the papacy by means of promulgating heresy. And in the statement by the 17 scholars that I referred to, I linked to in my article, they go through those heretical things, and they say, based upon what St. Robert Bellarmine, a doctor of the Church, St. John of God, and several other authorities in church history have posited that a pope who teaches heresy ipso facto loses his charism and his.
That makes sense.
Those are all very serious charges.
Thank you for walking us through that. We only have about 3 minutes left, and I do not want to neglect the southern border. I'm not going to play the video because it's 2.5 minutes long, but we recently had J.R. Nyquist on, who said that his conversation with Stanislav Lunev, in addition to the nuclear weapons being on U.S. soil, suitcase nukes being here on U.S. soil, that his conversation with Stanislav Lunev enlightened him in this, that they were going to use, the Chinese and the Russians agreed in 1991 to invade the United States using a Norway strategy that the Germans used in World War II to bring in special forces clandestinely, and then also to bring, using container ships, troops. This is a huge deal because our southern border is so porous. We know that the Jungle Tigers, we know that Unit 910 from Iran have crossed the southern border. They're here in America. So if you could, in, well, now 2 minutes, discuss this quick issue because you've been covering it for 40 years.
Yes, so I'm very glad that you brought up Jeff Nyquist. I saw the video that you broadcast earlier, and that is very dynamite testimony. So I'm aware of Stanislav Lunev, and I when I referred to the nuclear bombs, perhaps already here, backpack or suitcase nukes, as they've been referred to, he testified to that regard back in, I believe it was in the late 80s or early 90s. And Representative Kurt Weldon really worked with him on that. And yes, there were, I believe there is good evidence of that. But the other part that Jeff brought up, I wasn't aware that Stan Lunev had gone into that. It was something that concerned me because I was down on the border early 80s to mid 80s to late 80s many times with camera crews and whatnot, interviewing people. And I was there several times when large numbers of Chinese were captured on the border then in the 1980s. And at one time when I was there, it was about 50. Another time there were about 100 who were captured. And I asked the Border Patrol at the time, and it's in my video, Out of Control, the Immigration Invasion, which we produced in 1988. that I said, what happens to these Chinese? Because they are OTMs. They can't just, other than Mexicans, that's how they were designated. So they couldn't just be taken right back across the border like we did with Mexicans. He says, well, we have to release them, and they're given a court date, and they're supposed to come for a court appearance. I says, how many of them show up for court appearance? And he said, almost none of them.
Zero, yeah.
So that's been going on for decades. And so, yes, we could have whole divisions of Chinese, and it was the same with Russians. We've had a couple million Russians come here, most claiming religious persecution. And of course, many of them are, and many of them are very solid anti-communists. But we have, particularly in many years I was living in California, many still openly pro-Soviet, and they actually show old Soviet, not current Russian, but old Soviet propaganda on the television stations here in the U.S. or them in Russian.
And then the question would be very quickly, that means, or the implication is that there are Chinese warehouses here in the United States of America that have Chinese equipment and ammunition and guns already pre-positioned here in the United States. That's the implication of what
when you look at
Stan Ludev said.
Right. When you look at Long Beach, LA, any of our big ports on the East Coast or West Coast, where is most of the traffic coming from? From China. How many of those containers are actually examined? Almost none of them. It's scary. And so, yes, that is very likely. In fact, we did a story, it became a big news story 30 years ago about the transport that was from China that was loaded with firearms and with shoulder-fired missiles. And that was 30 years ago.
So if you could find that article, Bill, I would love to have you back on, and let's discuss that article about that transport to the United States back then. Bill Jasper, New American Magazine, thenewamerican.com. Thank you so much for joining me on Patriot Radio, as always. Blessings, friend.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Bill Jasper, senior editor for the New American Magazine. Another bombshell right there. The Chinese had been transporting to the United States. Incredible stuff. We're going to have him back on. In fact, we're going to try to get him back on either next Tuesday or Thursday to discuss this issue. This should be a national news story. Share Patriot Radio. Share the clip of Jared Nyquist. We need to be educating our friends, our family, our neighbors so that we can do something about this locally and have county prosecutors start prosecuting and breaking up these networks of jihadis and communists in the United States. Remember, coming up here this Saturday, 5 o'clock, right here in the On Fire Ministries parking lot, June 29th, the Summer of Harvest, Compassion to Action will be here at Chris Overstreet. And then July 13th, 3 o'clock at City Hall in downtown Spokane, the United for Israel March. I look forward to seeing you all then. And until then, have a great weekend. We're going to see what happens on the debate tonight. Remember, follow us on Telegram for real-time intelligence. Because if something happens, you're going to know first. This is Matt Shea. Thank you so much for joining me on Patriot Radio. May God bless all of you. And He is making this generation the greatest one. Keep up the fight.